The stagecoach rattled into Covenant Creek, carrying little more than dust and a promise. The townsfolk gathered, squinting at the midday sun, eager to see the mail-order bride intended for Bartholomew Lynch, the man who owned the town. But it wasn't the woman's beauty that silenced the crowd. It was the heavy, iron chains binding her wrists. She was delivered like cargo, her gaze defiant and unbroken. Lynch sneered at his damaged property. But one man, an outcast tracker watching from the shadows, saw not a criminal, but a soul. He knew that in this godless land, some chains are forged in lies, and only a different kind of faith can break them. The Wyoming dust of the Dakota Territory had a flavor: grit, alkali, and broken promises. It coated the inside of Seraphina Hayes's mouth, a constant, dry reminder of how far she had fallen. For 6 days, she had been chained to a bolt inside the swaying, claustrophobic stagecoach, her world reduced to the sweat-stained leather of the seat opposite, and the grim-faced guard who sat there, his shotgun never leaving his lap. When the coach finally groaned to a halt, the sudden silence was more deafening than the rattling of the wheels. "We're here," the guard, a burly man named Croft, grunted. He stepped out, his boots thudding on the packed earth. Seraphina heard the murmur of a crowd. She didn't move. She focused on her breathing, on the single point of dignity she had left. She was Seraphina Hayes, daughter of an scholar, and she would not be broken by this. The door was ripped open, flooding the coach with blinding, pale sunlight. "Get on out, girl. Your master's waiting." Croft seized her by the arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and hauled her out. Seraphina stumbled, her legs weak, her vision swimming. The chains on her wrists, heavy, pitted iron manacles, not standard-issue cuffs, clanked loudly, drawing a collective gasp from the dozen or so people gathered in the main street. The town of Covenant Creek was little more than a single muddy road, flanked by raw lumber storefronts, a saloon, a general store, a bank, and a large 2-story hotel that bore the name Lynch Grand in bold black paint. Before the hotel stood the man himself. Bartholomew Lynch was not a rugged frontiersman. He was a man of the East, dressed in a black wool suit despite the oppressive heat. His face was pale, his eyes small and shrewd, his thin lips pressed into a line of profound irritation. "What in the name of God is this?" Lynch's voice was not a boom, but a sharp, nasal sneer. He was looking at the chains. Croft, suddenly less confident, shoved Seraphina forward. She fell to her knees in the dust. "Mr. Lynch, sir. This is the one. Seraphina Hayes, sent by Mr. Marcus Vane from Philadelphia, just as the contract specified." "The contract specified a bride, you oaf, not a prisoner," Lynch snapped. "I run a respectable town. What is the meaning of this spectacle?" "Mr. Vane's instructions, sir. Explicit," Croft said, puffing his chest out. "She's a runner. A thief, too. Tried to steal from Mr. Vane, her benefactor. He said she was prone to hysterics and fabrication. Said to keep her chained until delivery, for her own safety. And yours." Seraphina kept her gaze fixed on the ground. "Lies. All of it. Lies." Lynch stared down at her, his lip curling in disgust. She was filthy, her brown hair matted with sweat and dust, her dress torn. "She's useless to me like this. Get them off her." Croft fumbled inside his coat pocket. His face went from smug to pale. He began patting himself down, his movements growing frantic. "The key. It must have—" He looked back at the stagecoach, then at the thick, ankle-deep mud of the street. "It's gone. I must have dropped it in the street." Lynch's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. "You incompetent fool! You brought me chattel you can't even unlock," the crowd whispered. This was a humiliation. Croft began splashing frantically in the mud, curses spitting from his lips. "I'll get the smith," a man in the crowd offered. "I want her unchained now," Lynch roared. It was then that a new voice, quiet and low, cut through the tension. "The lock is not the problem." A man moved from the shadows of the livery stable. The crowd parted for him, not with respect, but with a mixture of fear and disdain. He was tall and lean, dressed in simple buckskin trousers and a linen shirt. His skin was the color of rich copper, his black hair tied back, his features sharp and angular. He was known in Covenant Creek only as Elias, the half Lakota tracker who did odd jobs at the stable and occasionally scouted for the army, trusted by neither side. Lynch glared at him. "What did you say, half-breed?" Elias ignored the insult. He walked past Lynch and knelt in the dust in front of Seraphina. She flinched, but he made no move to touch her. His eyes, dark and piercing, met hers. He didn't look at her with pity or disgust or lust. He looked at her, Seraphina realized with a jolt, as if she were a person. "Do not fear," he said, his voice so low only she could hear it. He was not asking, but stating a fact. It was a prayer, a command. "Do not fear." His gaze moved to the chains. He examined the manacles, not the lock where Croft had lost the key, but the small, circular hinge on the opposite side. "These are not lawman's chains," he said, this time to the crowd. "These are custom forged, from the east. The pin is weak." "What are you babbling about?" Croft snapped, muddy and furious. Elias looked at him, his expression flat. "You were told to keep her chained. You were not told how to unchain her." Before anyone could react, Elias moved. From his boot, he slipped a thin, sharp-pointed tool, a steel awl used for mending leather. From his belt, he took a small, smooth, heavy stone. He placed the point of the awl against the tiny, recessed circle of the hinge pin. He held Seraphina's gaze. "This will be loud, but it will not hurt." He whispered something, a single word she didn't understand, a breath of Lakota spirituality in the grimy street. It was a prayer for focus, for true aim. Then he struck the handle of the awl with the stone. Crack! The sound was sharp as a gunshot. The rusted hinge pin shot out and buried itself in the mud. The iron manacle split in two. He repeated the process on the other wrist. Crack! The chains fell, clattering into the dust. Seraphina stared at her hands, raw and red, but free. She looked up at Elias, breathless. He stood, slipped his tools back into his belt, and melted back toward the livery, his work done. Bartholomew Lynch stared, momentarily stunned by the savage's sheer competence. But he recovered quickly. He seized Seraphina's arm, the same arm Croft had grabbed, and hauled her to her feet. "Get her inside! Get her cleaned!" he snarled to a woman who had run out from the hotel. "And you," he said, jabbing a finger at the stunned Croft. "You will find that key. You are not paid until I have it. I don't like loose ends." Lynch dragged Seraphina toward the hotel doors. She looked back one last time, but Elias was gone. The heavy doors of the Lynch ground swung shut behind her, sealing her in a new kind of prison. The Lynch Grand was an opulent mockery of Eastern refinement set against the harsh wilderness. The lobby was dark, furnished with heavy velvet curtains and brass fixtures that already smelled of tarnish. It was, Seraphina thought, a tomb wrapped in finery. "Mary!" Lynch bellowed. A young woman, pale and trembling, scurried from a back office. She couldn't have been more than 18, her apron clean, but her eyes wide with chronic fear. "This is Seraphina," Lynch said, shoving Seraphina toward the girl. "Take her upstairs. Room 201. Get her bathed, dressed, and presentable. I am hosting a dinner for the railroad commissioner this evening. She will be in attendance." "Yes, Mr. Lynch. Right away, sir." Mary grabbed Seraphina's elbow, her touch surprisingly gentle, and hurried her up the main staircase. The room, 201, was the finest in the hotel. It had a large four-poster bed, a mahogany wardrobe, and a window overlooking the bleak main street. It was also, Seraphina noted with a chill, a corner room, making it a long drop to the ground. As soon as Mary shut the door, she rushed to fill a basin with water from a pitcher. "You must be quick, miss. He does not abide tardiness." "Thank you," Seraphina whispered, her voice hoarse. She plunged her hands and face into the cool water, the simple act feeling like a resurrection. As Mary laid out a deep blue silk dress on the bed, a dress that was far too fine and clearly belonged to someone else, Seraphina spoke. "He said I was a mail-order bride. That was a lie, wasn't it?" Mary froze, her back to Seraphina. I don't know anything about that, miss." "Please," Seraphina insisted, walking closer. "I was told I was coming here to be a governess for a rancher's family. Then in Philadelphia, a man named Marcus Vane, my guardian, had that man Croft chain me. He said I was his property now." Mary turned, her face ashen. "Marcus Vane. He's the one Mr. Lynch does business with. The one who sends supplies." "Supplies? Girls, miss," Mary whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "Debtors, orphans, girls from the factories back east. Mr. Vane clears their debt by signing them into indentured servitude. He sends them west. Mr. Lynch, he finds places for them, at the saloon, at other houses, or for some, for himself." The blood drained from Seraphina's face. "My father, he trusted Marcus Vane. When my father died, Vane became my guardian. He seized my inheritance. He said I had stolen from him, that I was unhinged. He used that as an excuse. The chains were to make you look like a criminal," Mary finished, her eyes filling with tears, "so no one would question him when he sold you." Seraphina sank onto the bed, the silk cold beneath her hands. "So I am not a bride. I am a slave." "He calls it service," Mary whispered. "He holds the contract. He'll tell you that after you've worked for 5 years or 7 you'll be free, but no one ever leaves, miss. No one." A heavy, determined knock echoed through the room. Mary jumped, wiping her eyes. "He's here!" The door opened without waiting for an answer. Bartholomew Lynch stepped inside. He had changed into a fresh suit and was holding a small, velvet-covered box. "Mary, leave us." "Yes, sir." Mary fled, not making eye contact. Lynch surveyed Seraphina. She was clean now, her tangled hair towel-dried and falling in damp waves. He seemed to approve. "Better," he said. He sat in a chair, making no move to approach her. He was a man who preferred his power to be institutional, not physical. "Let us be clear, Seraphina. Your guardian, Mr. Vane, and I have a mutually beneficial arrangement. He is a man who solves problems. He solved his problem, an unruly, ungrateful ward, and he solved my problem, a lack of civilized companionship in this wasteland." "I am not your companion," Seraphina said, her voice shaking but cold. "You are precisely what the contract says you are," Lynch retorted, his eyes hardening. "You are indentured to me. Your father's considerable debts, which Mr. Vane so graciously assumed, are now mine. You will work them off. You will be my hostess. You will sit at my table, you will charm my associates, and you will share my quarters." He opened the velvet box. Inside, nestled on white satin, was a heavy, ornate silver necklace, studded with dull green stones. "You will wear this tonight," he said. "It will cover the unfortunate marks on your wrists. A gift to show my goodwill." Seraphina stared at the box, The necklace wasn't a gift. It was a collar. It was just a prettier, more expensive chain. And if I refuse? Lynch's smile was thin and reptilian. Then you will discover the difference between my hotel and my saloon. The girls at the saloon do not get silk dresses. They get used. Viciously. And Croft, who is still a guest of mine, has taken a particular dislike to you. I am sure he would be happy to manage you. Do you understand my meaning? The threat was clear. She had no choice. She was trapped. I understand, she whispered. Good. He stood, placing the box on her vanity. Be ready at 7. He walked to the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. Click. She heard the sound of a key turning in the lock from the outside. She ran to the door and twisted the handle. Locked. She ran to the window and threw it open. Below, 2 stories down, the muddy street was empty save for a few wagons. There was no escape. She was in a gilded cage, locked in, with the owner holding the only key. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass, her heart a cold stone in her chest. And then she saw him. Across the street, in the deep shadow between the general store and the assayer's office, a figure stood motionless. It was Elias. He wasn't looking at her, but at the hotel, at her locked door, at the building itself. He was watching, observing, learning. He had been there, she realized, this whole time. She didn't know if he was a friend. She didn't know if he was an enemy. But he was the only person in this entire town who had looked at her like she was human. A tiny, impossible ember of hope sparked to life in the frozen darkness of her despair. Elias Thorne lived in the spaces between. He was a ghost in the daylight, a man people saw but never looked at. To the white settlers of Covenant Creek, he was the half-breed, a man useful for tracking a lost mule or predicting the weather, but not to be trusted. To the Lakota, his mother's people, he was Iesca, Speaks White, a man tainted by the world of his father, a U.S. Army cartographer who had loved a Lakota woman and left his son with nothing but a white man's name and a divided heart. But Elias had a purpose. He wasn't just a stable hand. For the last 6 months, he had been operating as a scout and informant for U.S. Marshal Fenton, based out of Cheyenne. Fenton was building a case against Bartholomew Lynch. Lynch wasn't just a small-town tyrant. He was the head of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. He was using his charter for Covenant Creek to illegally seize Lakota land, forging claims and selling the plots to the incoming railroad. He was also, Fenton suspected, running guns, whiskey, and worse. Elias had been watching, mapping Lynch's operations, identifying his partners, and now a new piece had just been slammed onto the board, the girl in chains. He stood in the shadows, his eyes fixed on the hotel. He had seen Lynch lock her in. He had seen the fear in the maid, Mary. He had seen the smug, brutal confidence of the guard, Croft. But it was the chains that haunted him. He had not been lying. They were not prison issue. He'd spent enough time around army forts and marshals' offices to know the look of government steel. Those manacles were private, older, designed for control, not transport. And the pin hinge was a specific design, one he'd seen before on strong boxes from an Eastern foundry in Philadelphia, Vane's foundry. Elias moved, not toward the hotel, but toward the stagecoach depot. Croft was still there, ankle-deep in mud, cursing and kicking at the ground, a shovel in his hand. Elias approached silently. Croft, hearing no footsteps, startled and spun around, his hand flying to his pistol. "Find your key?" Elias asked, his voice neutral. "Get away from me, savage!" Croft spat, turning back to his digging. "This is your fault. That little trick with the pin. You embarrassed me in front of Lynch." "Lynch was embarrassed by you," Elias corrected him. "A man who loses his keys is a man who loses other things, his job, his life." Croft stopped digging. He turned slowly. "What do you know about it?" "I know Mr. Lynch doesn't like loose ends," Elias said, echoing the words Lynch himself had used. He saw the flicker of fear in Croft's eyes. "And a man who drops a key in the mud is a very loose end." "It was an accident." "Was it?" Elias took a step closer. "Or was it that you were so nervous, meeting the big man himself, that your hands were shaking? Must be a heavy responsibility, transporting Mr. Vane's property." Croft's eyes narrowed. "You know Vane?" "I know the name." Elias bluffed, his gut tightening. "I know he doesn't like his property damaged, but he really doesn't like his men drawing attention. And you, friend, you drew the whole town." Croft was sweating now, the mud on his clothes mixing with the perspiration. "Vane said she was dangerous, a thief." "Is that what she is?" Elias asked. "She looked small and educated, not like any thief I've ever seen, and I've seen many." "She's whatever Mr. Vane says she is," Croft said, too loudly. "I was just paid to deliver her. That's it. My job's done. Soon as I find that key, I'm getting my pay from Lynch and riding out." "Good plan," Elias said. He turned and walked away, leaving Croft to his desperate, muddy search. He had what he needed. Croft was not a lawman. He was hired muscle, and he was scared. He was a link in the chain connecting Lynch to this man Vane, and Serafina Hayes was trapped between them. Elias needed to get into the hotel. He needed to talk to the maid, Mary. He waited until dusk, when the lamps were being lit and the smell of roasting meat and stale beer spilled from the saloon. He moved to the back of the Lynch Grand. A small yard was cluttered with barrels and crates. He saw Mary shaking out a tablecloth from the back porch. He didn't call to her. He hissed, a short, sharp sound like a snake in the dust. Mary froze, dropping the cloth. Who's there?" Elias stepped out from behind a rain barrel. Mary recoiled, her hand flying to her mouth. "You, the tracker, get away. If Mr. Lynch sees you—" "He won't," Elias said. "The girl, Serafina, she's in room 201. "How did you know?" "Lynch is a man of habit. He keeps his valuables in the same place, the corner room, with one door and 2 windows. Easy to guard, hard to escape." He held out his hand. In his palm lay a small, carved piece of wood. A simple, smooth bird. A dove. It was a token his mother had given him. "Give this to her." "What is it?" Mary whispered, terrified. "It's a sign that she is not alone. Tell her the man who broke the chains can also break the walls. But he needs a name. The name of the man who sent her here. The real name." "Vane," Mary breathed. "Marcus Vane. She must confirm it. And I need to know what Lynch is planning. Tell her to be strong. Tell her to watch. Tell her to find what Vane and Lynch are trading." Mary looked at the small wooden bird. This was a terrible risk. If she was caught, Lynch would— She couldn't even think about it. But then she thought of Serafina, of her red, raw wrists, and the dead look in her eyes. I'll try," Mary whispered, snatching the bird and hiding it in her apron pocket. "Tonight, at the dinner. I'll be serving. I'll find a way." "Good," Elias said. He stepped back, and the shadows swallowed him whole. Mary hurried back inside, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had just joined a conspiracy. Upstairs in room 201, Serafina fastened the heavy silver collar around her own neck. She looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger, a pale, frightened ghost in a rich blue dress with a silver noose around her throat. "No," she whispered, her hands balling into fists. "I am Serafina Hayes, and I will not be broken. She would go to the dinner. She would smile, and she would watch. She would find a way to burn this gilded cage to the ground. The dinner was an agonizing performance. Serafina was seated at Bartholomew Lynch's right hand, a living trophy for him to display. The guests included the railroad commissioner, Mr. Thorne, no relation to Elias, a fact that seemed to amuse Lynch, a portly banker named Peterson, and the ever-present, glowering figure of Croft, who had been invited as a boorish warning. "Miss Hayes is a recent ward of mine," Lynch explained to the table, his hand resting possessively on the back of her chair. "Her family in Philadelphia fell on hard times, and I am sponsoring her new life here in the West, a charitable act, you might say." "How noble of you, Lynch," Commissioner Thorne said, raising his glass, "to bring such refinement to our dusty corner of the world." Serafina smiled, a tight, painful mask. "Mr. Lynch has been most welcoming," she said, her voice clear and steady. Lynch's eyes glittered. He enjoyed her performance. He believed he had broken her. Throughout the meal, Serafina listened. The men spoke of land parcels, shipping manifests, and labor shortages. "The problem, Bartholomew, is stability," the commissioner said, swirling his brandy. "My superiors won't approve the final route through the Black Hills unless we can guarantee the land is clear. The Sioux are restless." "The Lakota are a solved problem," Lynch sneered. "The army has them penned, and my surveyors have assured me the parcels are empty, just waiting for grading." "And your labor?" asked Peterson, the banker. "We're funding the expansion, but we can't find men willing to lay track in that heat." "Mr. Vane is handling the labor," Lynch said, a slight, knowing smile playing on his lips. "He has a steady supply of workers from the east, men who are eager for a fresh start. They've already signed contracts, long-term." Serafina felt a chill. He's not just trafficking women. He's trafficking men, enslaving them to build his railroad. It was Croft who ruined the fragile peace. He had been drinking heavily, his eyes fixed on Serafina. "She's a pretty one, Lynch," he slurred, pointing a chicken bone at her. "For a thief. Back in Philly, Vane said she near cleaned him out, had to chain her up like a rabid dog." The table fell silent. The commissioner looked horrified. Lynch's face went white with fury. He had been exposed. This was not the image of the respectable benefactor he wanted to project. Serafina saw her opening. She didn't cower. She turned her cool gaze on Croft. "Is that what Mr. Vane told you, Mr. Croft? Or is that what he paid you to say?" Croft blinked, confused. "What?" "Mr. Vane is a creative accountant," Serafina said, her voice carrying in the silent room. "He absorbed my father's estate. When I asked to see the ledgers, I was suddenly a thief. When I threatened to go to the authorities, I was unhinged. And when I tried to flee his house, I was a runner." "Tell me, Mr. Lynch," she said, turning her head slowly to meet his gaze. "Does a man of your intelligence truly believe I could clean out a man as guarded as Marcus Vane? Or is it more likely that I am the one who was stolen?" Lynch was trapped. His guests were staring. To agree with Croft made him look like a slaver. To agree with Serafina made Vane look like a criminal, tainting their business. "That is quite enough, Serafina," Lynch said, his voice dangerously low. "Yes," Serafina agreed, placing her napkin on the table. "I believe it is." She had exposed the lie, planted the seed of doubt. She had taken his humiliation and thrown it back in his face. The dinner party dissolved quickly after that. The commissioner made his excuses, his face troubled. The moment the last guest was gone, Lynch grabbed Serafina's arm, his fingers biting into her flesh like steel talons, and dragged her from the room. He shoved her up the stairs, Croft following close behind. He threw her into room 201. You humiliated me," he seethed, his face inches from hers. "You humiliated yourself by trafficking in human beings." She spat. The slap was so hard, it sent her reeling back against the wall. Her cheek exploded in pain, her ears ringing. "You are mine," he roared, his civilized mask completely gone. "You are property, and property doesn't speak." He stormed out of the room, slamming the door. The key turned, the sound of the lock a final, brutal punctuation. Serafina slid to the floor, her body trembling, her cheek stinging. Tears of pain and rage welled, but she refused to let them fall. She had hurt him. She had shown him she was not a passive doll. But she had also sealed her fate. He would break her now, or he would sell her to the saloon. Her time was running out. An hour passed. The hotel grew quiet. Then she heard a tiny scraping sound at the door. Not a key, but something sliding underneath. She crawled to the door. In the dim moonlight she saw it. A small wooden bird. The dove. She snatched it up. It was real. She wasn't alone. A moment later, a quiet knock. "Miss?" Mary's voice, barely a breath. Serafina pressed her face to the door. "Mary, he'll kill you." "He's downstairs with Croft, drinking," Mary whispered frantically. "The tracker. Elias. He's waiting. He said you were smart. He said you would understand what the men were talking about." "Land," Serafina whispered back, "and labor. From Vane. Lynch is using Vane's servants to build the railroad on land he's stealing from the Lakota." Elias knew it, Mary breathed. "He said the proof would be in Mr. Lynch's office, in his safe. He keeps a ledger there, miss, a private one, where he details his partners and payments." "I can't get out, Mary," Serafina choked. "You don't have to," Mary said. "He's going to get you out, tomorrow night. He's going to make a diversion, a big one. But he needs that ledger. He says it's the only thing that connects Lynch to Vane, legally. Without it, Lynch is just a bully. With it, he's a federal criminal." "The safe, Mary. I can't open a safe." "Mr. Lynch is arrogant," Mary said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Elias says arrogant men are lazy. They use combinations they can remember. A birthday, an anniversary." A cold, horrifying realization dawned on Serafina. "Vane. He was my guardian. He managed all my affairs. He knew my birthday. He used it for everything. My accounts. My mother's jewelry box." "What is it?" Mary pressed. "August 4th. 18. She whispered the numbers. Lynch wouldn't have changed it. He would see it as owning me. Owning my very birth." "Tomorrow night, miss," Mary said. "When the diversion hits, Mr. Lynch's office is on the first floor, just behind the front desk. Get the ledger. Elias will be waiting." The footsteps on the stairs made them both freeze. Mary scurried away. Serafina retreated to her bed, clutching the wooden dove so tightly its edges bit into her palm. Tomorrow night. It wasn't just an escape. It was a reckoning. The next night, Covenant Creek was tense. The air was still, heavy and hot, promising a storm that wouldn't break. Lynch had kept Serafina locked in her room all day, a punishment that had given her time to think, to plan. Her cheek throbbed with a dull, purple bruise, a constant reminder of what she was fighting. Lynch, meanwhile, was busy. He and Croft had been in and out of the hotel, riding to the edge of town where a large, nondescript barn stood near the dry riverbed. This was Lynch's storage depot. Elias watched from a ridge overlooking the town, his position hidden by scrub and rock. He had spent the day preparing. He knew Lynch was moving a massive shipment of contraband tonight, not to the reservation, but from it. Lynch wasn't just selling whiskey to the Lakota. He was trading it for sacred artifacts, items his surveyors looted from burial sites, which he then shipped east with Vane's help to wealthy, unscrupulous collectors in Philadelphia and Boston. The barn was full of them. It was also, Elias knew, full of poorly stored kerosene and blasting powder for the railroad crews. As the sun bled out of the sky, Elias made his move. He was a shadow, moving down the ridge. He had one goal, the barn. He didn't just need a diversion. He needed a fire so large and so threatening to Lynch's real wealth that it would pull every man, including Croft, from the hotel. He reached the barn, the heavy, sweet, acrid smell of kerosene thick in the air. He worked quickly, piling oil-soaked rags near the stacked crates. This was a dangerous, fine line. He had to destroy the contraband, create a massive diversion, but not let the fire spread to the town. He was Iesca, the man between worlds. He knew how to use the white man's tools, and he knew the Lakota respect for Peter, the fire, its power to cleanse and destroy. He set the charge, a long fuse of oil-soaked rope. He lit the end. Then he ran, melting back into the darkness, circling toward the front of the hotel. Inside the Lynch Grand, Serafina was pacing. She heard the clock downstairs chime 9 times. Her nerves were shredded raw. Suddenly, a muffled whoomp echoed from the edge of town, followed by a bright orange flash that lit up her window. A second later, shouting erupted in the street. "Fire! Fire! Lynch's depot is on fire!" She heard Lynch roar from downstairs. "What? No! Not the depot!" She heard the heavy slam of the front doors. She ran to the window. In the street below, she saw Lynch, Croft, and 3 other men running flat out toward the edge of town, where a column of angry orange flame was now climbing into the sky. This was it. She twisted the handle of her door. Still locked. "Mary!" she hissed. A moment later, she heard the scrape of a key. The lock clicked. The door swung open, revealing Mary, pale but resolute. "He left his master keys on the desk," she said. "Go. I'll be here, waiting." Serafina grabbed Mary's shoulders. "No. When I leave, you leave. Get your things. Go to the stable. Tell Elias I sent you. Now go." Mary's eyes widened, but she nodded and fled down the back stairs. Serafina flew down the main staircase. The hotel lobby was empty, the front doors wide open, spilling the flickering, hellish light of the fire inside. Behind the front desk was the door to Lynch's office. It was unlocked. She burst in. The room was dark, dominated by a large oak desk and, in the corner, a black iron safe. Her hands trembled as she knelt before it. She spun the dial, clearing it. Her mind raced. Right to 8. Left past 8 to 4. Right to 18. She pulled the heavy steel handle. It didn't budge. "No. No, please," she whispered, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. She tried again. Right to 8. Left, passing 8, stopping at 4. Right, stopping at 18. She pulled. The handle clicked and turned. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost made her sick, washed over her. She pulled the heavy door open. Inside, there were stacks of cash, deeds, and a single, thick, black-bound ledger. She grabbed it. "I have it." She ran from the office, clutching the book to her chest. She was halfway across the lobby, a clear path to the open front door, to freedom. "Going somewhere, girlie?" She froze. Leaning against the far wall, casually lighting a cigar, was Croft. He wasn't at the fire. He sent me," Serafina stammered, trying to hide the ledger. To fetch his papers." Croft's smile was a predator's. "Did he now? See, I figured this whole thing was a setup. The savage breaks your chains. You make a scene at dinner, and now a convenient fire. Lynch is a fool, but I'm not. I told him. I said, that tracker is involved. He told me to go to the fire. I decided to wait. He advanced on her, his eyes dropping to the ledger she was holding. And look what I find. The little thief, caught red-handed, just like Vane said. He lunged for her. Serafina screamed and threw a brass spittoon at his head. He ducked, and she bolted for the door. She made it to the porch, to the street, but he was faster. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back so hard she fell, the ledger skittering across the wooden planks of the boardwalk. "You're not going anywhere," Croft snarled, pulling his pistol. "You and your half-breed friend, your games are over." He raised the gun to her head. I agree. The voice came from the street. Elias Thorne stepped out of the smoke, his face grim, a rifle held steady at his hip. The fire cast, flickering, demonic shadows across his face. "Your game," Elias said, "is over." The street was a tunnel of smoke and orange light. The roar of the fire was a backdrop to the terrifying silence between the three of them. Croft kept the pistol aimed at Serafina, but turned his head toward Elias. "So the stable hand is a gunman. I knew it. You set the fire, didn't you? You and this little witch." "Get away from her, Croft," Elias said, his voice a low command. He didn't move the rifle. It was pointed at the ground, a sign he was offering a choice. "Or what?" Croft laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You'll shoot me. Then Lynch's men will hang you. And her, I'll kill her right now, before I even hit the ground." He pressed the muzzle of his pistol to Serafina's temple. She squeezed her eyes shut, her body rigid with terror, but she refused to cry. Elias needed to break the stalemate. He had to use his mind, not his weapon. "You're a fool, Croft," Elias said, his voice cutting through the smoke. "You think Lynch is your partner. You think he'll protect you. Lynch pays me good. Vane pays me good. That's all I need. Vane paid you to transport a girl. He didn't pay you to get caught in a federal investigation." Croft's smugness wavered. "What? What federal investigation? You're just a breed." "Those chains you used," Elias said, taking a slow step forward. "I told you they were custom. From a foundry in Philadelphia. Vane's foundry. The same foundry that just lost a federal contract because they were caught short-selling the U.S. Army on Cannon steel. The same foundry that's being investigated right now for kidnapping and indentured slavery." Croft's face went pale. "Lies. You're lying." "Am I?" Elias asked. He was close now, only 10 feet away. "You're not a bodyguard, Croft. You're a witness. Vane sent you out here to get rid of you, to tie off a loose end. And now Lynch, his partner, is going to do the same. When this is over, whose body do you think they'll find in the burned-out barn? The thief who set the fire, and her unknown accomplice. You." The psychology was a hammer blow. Croft, a man motivated entirely by fear and greed, looked from Elias to the cowering Serafina, to the raging fire. He saw the trap closing. He wouldn't," Croft stammered. "He already has," Elias said. "He left you here." That was the final push. Croft's loyalty shattered. He made his choice. He would take the tracker, get the girl, and ride out, using her as a hostage to get clear. He swung his pistol from Serafina's head toward Elias. "You first, tracker." He was fast, but Elias was faster. Elias hadn't been waiting to aim his rifle. He had been waiting to move. As Croft's arm swung, Elias dropped the rifle and drew his revolver in a single, fluid motion. Bang! The shot echoed, momentarily louder than the fire. Croft yelled, a high-pitched scream, and his pistol clattered to the boardwalk. He stared at his right hand, now a bloody ruin, his trigger finger gone. Elias moved, kicking the gun away. He grabbed Serafina, pulling her up and behind him, pushing the fallen ledger back into her hands. "It's over, Croft. You're done. Kill them!" The roar came from the street. Bartholomew Lynch, his face black with soot and apoplectic with rage, was storming back from the fire, his other men behind him. The fire was a lost cause. He had realized, too late, what it was meant for. "He's got the ledger. Kill them both!" Lynch screamed, pulling his own ornate pistol. The hotel lobby exploded into chaos. Lynch's men charged the boardwalk. Elias shoved Serafina behind the heavy oak desk inside the office. "Stay down!" A shot splintered the doorframe where her head had been. Elias used the lobby's heavy velvet curtains for cover, firing 2 precise shots. One man cried out and fell, clutching his leg. The other ducked behind the staircase. Lynch and the remaining man burst into the lobby. "He's in the office!" Lynch yelled. "Mr. Lynch, in here!" The voice came from behind them. Mary, the maid, stood at the top of the back staircase, holding the single heaviest object she could find, a cast-iron skillet. As the remaining henchmen turned, confused, Mary brought the skillet down on his head with all her strength. The clang of iron on skull was sickening. The man crumpled to the floor. Mary stood there, shaking, tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling. Lynch stared, stunned at the betrayal. It was the only opening Elias needed. He burst from the office, tackling Lynch around the waist. The 2 men crashed over a table, Lynch's pistol flying and discharging into the ceiling, raining plaster down on them. Lynch was a brawler. He clawed at Elias's eyes, but Elias was stronger, faster. He landed a single hard punch to Lynch's jaw. The man went limp. Silence. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire outside, the groans of the wounded men, and the ragged, desperate breathing of Serafina, Mary, and Elias. Serafina stumbled out from the office, clutching the ledger. Is he dead?" "No," Elias said, breathing heavily as he got to his feet. "Just unconscious." He looked at Mary, who was still holding the skillet. He gave her a nod of profound respect. "Well done." "Now what?" Mary whispered, looking at the carnage. We have to run." "No," Serafina said, her voice shaking but hard. She looked at the ledger, at the bruised, unconscious tyrant on the floor. "No more running." She bent down and grabbed Lynch's pistol from the floor. She pointed it at his head, her hand trembling. "He took everything. He deserves to die." "He does," Elias said, quietly, stepping beside her. "But not by your hand." "Why not?" she choked out. "After this? After what he's done?" "Because that," Elias said, "is his way, not yours." Serafina stared at the man who had bought and brutalized her. She saw the pathetic, bleeding man beneath the monster. She lowered the gun. "Good," Elias said, "because we need him alive." "Why?" Mary asked. "Because," a new, loud voice called from the front door, "it's much harder to try a dead man for his crimes." They spun around. Framed in the smoky doorway, flanked by 4 men wearing U.S. Marshal badges, stood a tall, grim-faced man with a silver star pinned to his vest. "Elias," the man said, nodding. "Looks like you made a mess." "You're late, Marshal Fenton," Elias replied, not a trace of a smile on his face. Fenton stepped over Croft, who was groaning and clutching his hand on the boardwalk. "Your fire was a bit more enthusiastic than we planned. Had to secure the rest of the town first. Is that him?" "Bartholomew Lynch," Elias said. "And this," he pointed to the book in Serafina's hand, "is the ledger. Vane, the land fraud, the indentured contracts. It's all in there." Marshal Fenton looked at Serafina, his eyes taking in her bruised cheek and torn dress. "Mum, "You are Serafina Hayes." "I am," she said. "We received a wire from the U.S. Attorney's office in Philadelphia 2 days ago. Marcus Vane was arrested. He started talking. He gave us Lynch, and he gave us you. We were coming for him tomorrow. Elias. He just sped up the timeline." The world tilted under Serafina's feet. Vane was arrested. It's over. Fenton's men moved in, hauling the groaning Lynch to his feet, cuffing Croft, and securing the other 2 henchmen. Serafina looked at Elias. You knew. You knew they were coming." "I knew they were supposed to be coming," Elias corrected her. "I work for Fenton, but I don't trust the white man's promises. I trust what I can see. I saw you in chains. I couldn't wait. The ledger was our insurance." He looked at the ledger in her hands. "You did well, Serafina Hayes." "We did," she corrected him, looking at Mary, who was finally lowering the heavy skillet. The long night was finally over. By dawn, Covenant Creek was a changed town. The Lynch Grand was now a makeshift headquarters for the U.S. Marshals. The barn on the edge of town was a smoking, skeletal ruin, the ground littered with the charred and melted remains of stolen Lakota artifacts and cases of whiskey. Bartholomew Lynch, his face swollen and his arrogance shattered, was locked in his own hotel's storeroom alongside Croft, awaiting transport to Cheyenne for trial. Marshal Fenton stood on the hotel porch, reviewing the black ledger with Serafina and Elias. "This is comprehensive," Fenton said, clearly impressed. "Names, dates, payments. This doesn't just hang Lynch. It implicates the railroad commissioner and half the territorial government. You've done a great service, Miss Hayes." "I just wanted to be free, Marshal," Serafina said quietly. She looked down at her wrists. The red, angry marks from the irons were already fading to purple, but she felt she would wear their ghosts forever. "Your testimony, along with this ledger, will be enough to reclaim your father's estate from Vane's creditors," Fenton continued. "You are free to return to Philadelphia. We can arrange for an escort." Philadelphia. The word sounded foreign, like a place from another life. She thought of the grey, suffocating drawing rooms, the polite, cruel society that had allowed Vane to do what he did. She looked out at the vast, open, dangerous land. The sky a pale, clean blue after the night of fire and smoke. "What about Mary?" Serafina asked. "Miss Mary has been offered a position running the hotel's kitchens, for a fair wage, under the authority of the U.S. government until the town's assets are sorted out," Fenton said, smiling. "She seems eager." Serafina smiled too. Mary, who had been too afraid to speak, was now giving orders to a marshal's deputy about breakfast. Fenton closed the ledger and tipped his hat. "Elias, my superiors are pleased, despite the property damage. There's a full-time scout position for you, federal pay, if you want it." Elias stared out at the street, his expression unreadable. "I'm a tracker, Marshal, not a soldier. I'll find what you need me to find, but I won't wear a uniform." "Fair enough," Fenton said. He knew better than to push. He turned and went back inside, leaving Elias and Serafina alone on the porch in the cool morning light. A long silence settled between them. "So you will go home?" Elias asked finally. "I don't have a home," Serafina replied, touching the bruised skin on her cheek. "Philadelphia is a cage of a different kind. Vane is gone, but the men like him are not." "No," Elias agreed. "They are not." She looked at him, at the man who had looked at her chains and seen a person, the man who had risked his life, not for a contract or for money, but because he saw an injustice. "What about you? Will you stay here? Track for the marshal?" Elias shook his head. "Lynch is gone, but the town remains. They will find a new man to hate. And I'm tired of being looked at, but never seen." He gestured to the open plains, to the south, toward the Black Hills. "My mother's people are there. They are in chains, just as you were, on a reservation. I need to see what I can do for them." This was goodbye. The realization struck Serafina with a surprising pang of loss. He was the only person in this entire territory who understood. "You saved my life, Elias," she said. "You saved your own," he replied. "You spoke when they wanted you silent. You fought when they wanted you broken. I just opened the hinge." He walked down the steps, heading toward the stable to claim his horse. "Elias," she called out. He stopped and turned. She walked down the steps to stand in front of him in the dusty street. "You said, when you untied me, you said, 'Do not fear,' and you whispered something. A prayer." "I did," he said. "A prayer to Wakantanka, the great mystery. A prayer for a clear eye and a steady hand." "It worked," she said, offering a small, fragile smile. "It did." He looked at her, his dark eyes finally letting go of the guarded suspicion he lived with. "But the prayer was not just for the chains, Serafina. It was for you. It was a prayer that you would remember your own strength, that you would not let this place, or these men, break what was inside you." He paused. "My mother used to say, true freedom is not the absence of walls. It is the will to see past them." Serafina looked at her free hands. She looked at the open road. She looked at the man who saw her. "When you ride south," she said, her voice catching, Do you need a translator? Someone who can read contracts? Someone who knows how to spot a lie in a white man's ledger?" Elias stared at her, a rare, slow spark of surprise and something else in his eyes. "That is a hard road, Serafina. Dangerous. There are no silk dresses there." "Good," Serafina said, a new, powerful energy filling her. "I hate silk dresses." Elias Thorne looked at her for a long moment. He saw the fire from the night before, not in the barn, but in her eyes. It was a fire that had not been put out. It had been cleansed. He didn't smile, but the lines around his eyes softened. He nodded. Once. "Then we should ride. The day is wasting." He turned and walked to the stable. Serafina Hayes stood for one last second in the street of Covenant Creek. She took the heavy silver necklace, the collar from her pocket, where she'd kept it, and threw it into the mud where her chains had fallen. She turned her back on the Lynch Grand and walked after Elias, not into the shadows, but into the sun. The dust settled on Covenant Creek, but for Serafina and Elias, the journey was just beginning. They rode away not as bride and warrior, but as two survivors who found strength in the most unlikely place. Their story reminds us that true freedom isn't just the breaking of chains, but the courage to defy the person who forged them. It's the quiet, unbroken prayer of resilience in a world determined to lock you down, and the will to find your own path, even if you have to burn the old one down. What did you think of Serafina's courage? Do you believe in karmic justice for men like Lynch and Vane? Let me know your favorite part of this story in the comments below. Your engagement truly helps the channel. And if you enjoyed this story of Wild West drama, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good revenge story, and most importantly, subscribe for more brand new stories of justice and survival every single week. Thank you for listening.